Welcome to Tech Data's 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Welcome everyone to this next episode of 30 Minutes with a Hacker. This is Jade Whitty with Tech Data Security Solutions Group, and with me here today is Brett Scott, who is our resident ethical hacker and who we pick his brain every month, and he shares his insights with us. Today is going to be a really good podcast on the topic of threat hunting and the importance that it plays as there's a shift in the industry. We're going to talk about that. If you didn't listen to last month's episode 20, we went into a lot of Brett's background and how he got into cybersecurity, and I think that would be really interesting for you to listen to if you haven't already. So to get into this topic, though, I really want to kind of set the stage for why this has become so important. And it really stems from the SolarWinds attack and other similar type of breaches. But Brett, I'm going to have you kind of share with us just a quick overview of the SolarWinds breach as we're kind of breaking into this.
Certainly. Well, the SolarWinds is what is being dubbed a supply chain attack. So instead of the bad guys attacking individual targets, they attack a provider or a vendor that supplies software to all the people they want to target. So they compromise the vendor. They figured out after compromising the vendor that they could modify the updates that the customers were downloading for themselves. And so they introduced malicious code. And then as customers updated their systems from the vendor, they invited in the vulnerability that was put there by the bad guys.
So I know Microsoft, at least a lot of people are pointing at them right now because this may be the way the hackers got in, and it's through what's called the golden SAML or SAML security hole that I think Microsoft discovered back in 2017. And that vulnerability wasn't plugged. And even though it was discovered, so we can blame Microsoft, but you can kind of validate, because I know you have certain things you can and can't say, but I'm just going to say that they didn't plug that hole because maybe our government didn't want them to plug it. And is that fair to say?
If I were a betting man, that would be a really good bet.
So this vulnerability from Microsoft is one of the ways probably that they got in. There may be others. I know there's an ongoing investigation into figuring this out, but this is one of those. And the sad thing is that it probably could have been prevented if we didn't want, as a government, to have this as a back door. There's a lot of these different back doors that our government has in place, and this was one of those. And so unfortunately it gets exploited and gets used for the wrong purpose. So you can liken this to a skeleton key, is how some people refer to the golden SAML vulnerability. And there's many of these out there. If you'd like to research it, Brett, how can they find out more information?
Or certainly a lack of enthusiasm to fix them, right? So there is an organization out there called the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org, EFF.org. And if you do a search engine search for CALEA, and then EFF, it's usually the first thing that responds. So it's on their website.
Okay, great. So that kind of sets the stage, though, because what we're seeing now is a shift happening in the industry from just trying to find out if you've been breached or not and plug the hole to actually realizing that you've already been breached. That's what companies are realizing. That's the truth of the matter, that a lot of hackers have gotten in 6 months to a year on average into an organization, and people aren't even aware. So the shift now is going to threat hunting. Maybe talk a little bit about the skill set necessary to do effective threat hunting.
Yeah, that's a good point. But a lot of the security trends that have been going on, things like zero trust and things, other concepts like that, and of course threat hunting are pointing to the thought that, well, we're not necessarily going to be successful in keeping the bad guys off of our networks. And since we also can't detect them, even if they are here for up to a year, maybe we should do something to go find them before they linger too long. I use a story when I talk to people and say, imagine if one day you walked into the living room of your house and there was a stranger there, and you say, "Hey, what are you doing in my house?" And their response to you is, "What do you mean? I live here. I'm getting mail here now. I've been here for half a year." That's that kind of puts a real world version of what is happening to every single organization out there. And by the way, 6 months, that's a fairly ambitious guess. Most people don't discover this information for well past 6 months. So that means that the dwell time of the bad guys on your network is long. So then how do you cut short the losses to your organization? And there's a simple answer, and that is threat hunt, right? So you need to go find those bad guys, find where they have toeholds on your network, and then you're going to need to kick them out.
So that skill set, though, to be able to actually find that a hacker is already in your network, maybe they're not doing anything at that time, they're just laying low. But to be able to find that hacker that's in there, that skill set is a super specialized skill set. And sadly, we don't have that many people with that skill set. There's a huge cyber security skills gap right now. You can go to cyberseek.org and look at that. There's just not enough people with the ability. So these are people that do have the skill set. Talk to us a little bit about, the cost of hiring these people and what kind of companies can actually afford it, and what do you do if you can't afford it?
Well, needless to say, the absolute dramatic increase in cyber attack activity during 2020, as people went to work from home, and there are a lot of other compelling reasons why they did that, has not only upped the volume, but it also upped the breaches, right? The break-ins to all of these networks. So the very limited few people who have the skill set are extremely high in demand. It's almost impossible to get a hold of them. All the money in the world won't get you one of those people because they're just too busy. There are all these other people that have all the other money in the world, and so you're competing against everyone with money to try to get these people. It's just really, really difficult to find them. Then of course the skills gap applies to people who are in the trade, right? So the person you get might not actually be able to do the job very well. They might just have hung up a shingle and say, "Oh yeah, I can threat hunt for you," and have no idea how to actually do that because they think you don't know how to do it. So how would you call them out for not doing it well? So it's a really big problem for organizations to be able to identify a capable cyber warrior that knows how to threat hunt and can help your organization identify those threats. It's a big challenge.
So, and only the bigger corporations really have got the budgets to be able to hire these. So unfortunately, you've got a lot of small to mid-sized companies that just really don't have the budget to be able to do that. So it's a little bit scary when you think about what do you do in this situation. And we've talked through how you can mitigate this, and I want you to talk a little bit about that, starting with the SIM solution as one of those.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you don't have to necessarily use even a commercial SIM solution, right? You can use things like open source. If you're willing to trade time for money, in other words, you're going to spend more time than money, then open source is a way to get things done. So whether you're putting in elbow grease or you're putting in cash, using a SIM solution not only fundamentally improves your organization's cybersecurity posture, but it gives you the opportunity to more easily discover those threats or those dwell time people that are the bad guys that are on your network.
So even if you don't have, let's say, the IT personnel, maybe you've just got an IT director that's strong in networking and knows servers and storage and all that, but is not strong in cybersecurity, there are SOC solutions, Security Operations Center, as a service where you get the people, the processes, and the technologies where you can pay for that on a monthly basis. And the cost isn't that exorbitant. Small to mid-sized companies can't afford to do this. So you can implement your own SIM solution, or you can have a SOC as a service, but that's actually not going to solve the problem in and of itself. So talk a little bit about that, Brett.
Yeah, it's not a golden bullet, right? Or a silver bullet or any color platinum bullet, whatever you want to call it. Having a SIM solution is going to improve your security posture, whether that be on site with your own SIM or whether you're using a managed security service provider, an MSSP that does the SOC for you. No matter what, you're going to have a better chance to do something, because whether it's a device that helps you collect the information, or more experienced eyes watching what's going on your networks, one or the other, you're going to improve your ability to find them. But that's still also not a panacea, right? There are so many things that are going on your network all of the time. To be able to find those really sophisticated threats that maybe aren't very chatty, maybe they're laying low on your network. It just, that reduces chances for someone or something as a technology to catch it. So you're going to need to do something else to be more effective in fighting those problems.
So what do you recommend?
One of the easiest answers, which is a pretty good combination. So, a SIM with a threat intelligence or a threat feed, right? That is a really solid answer, because the threat feed is data that's being aggregated from other things that people have discovered. So, for example, let's say that an alien species is going to invade the United States. And the way that they're going to invade the United States is they're going to pretend to be apples. And then these apples get bought at the grocery store, you bring them home, and all of a sudden they spring out of your fruit bowl and attack your family, right? So when you have a threat feed service, other people who have had to fight those aliens that sprung up out of their food bowls can say, "Hey, watch out for apples. Those apples, they're dangerous." Because of that, you are benefiting from someone else's negative experience. A threat feed helps you to say, "Oh, wow, I got to check the apples in my house to make sure they're not aliens," right? And so that is a rather bizarre example, but that just gives you an idea of how crazy my mind is. But the bottom line is that a threat feed service allows you, it gives you an indication of where the problem is, right? Just like you would benefit from someone who understands or knows what a fire looks like, walking ahead of your team and saying, "Yeah, you see that area over there, right there? That's on fire. And look over here, this has got some problems. And I can see some smoke over there. We got to do something about that." That allows your team, which may be clattered with tons and tons of information overload hitting them, to be able to say, okay, these are the things I should be focusing on because someone knows what they're looking at, or someone told me through a threat intelligence feed, these are the things to look out for. So it allows you to quickly identify those things, whether they be noisy or quiet, that your team can then go in to investigate, and you will absolutely get a much higher value for your time spent.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we have a cyber skills gap right now. So to hire the people, if you have the money, is very, very challenging. Having a SIM solution or a SOC as a service, if you don't have the security personnel in place for that, but you need to have some type of a threat feed integrated with that. That's going to enable you to see the actual threats inside your network that are critical so that you could kick those people out. Without that threat feed with the SIM solution, is very, very difficult to even find the bad guys that are in your network, correct?
Totally. It's a way of quickly picking out the little bits of information that are real and significant that your team should be focusing on, rather than them trying to plow through a massive amount of data that the systems are reporting to them. So it's just a way of immediately flagging the things that your team should pay a little extra attention to.
So I know there's a lot of different threat feeds out there, and some of them are open source, and there's pros and cons to that. I know that Tech Data has an ISAL, a threat feed service that a lot of our partners are leveraging, and it's a little bit different. I want you to talk a little bit about your background, your capabilities, and what's in that threat feed that kind of is unusual from what's out on the market.
Yeah, certainly. So threat feeds generally come in the form of emails on Fridays, and you might anyone who hasn't had an exposure would say that's silly, and the answer is probably yeah. But when people find those things, right? In other words, the apples sprung up out of the fruit bowl and attacked the whole family. They then say, okay, it was a Macintosh type apple, and I bought it at this grocery store chain, and these are the attributes of that, and I concluded that must have been the alien that jumped out of the fruit bowl, was that particular apple. So then they send out an email saying, hey, everybody, watch out for Macintosh apples that were bought at this grocery store chain, and because they could be aliens ready to attack your family, and so that then becomes an email or some kind of notification to your team. Your team then reads the email and says, oh my gosh, apples are attacking people. And then they say, you know what, we should probably put in some rules, or we should take these what are called IOCs, indicators of compromise, and then let's put them into our system. They do that manually, and then hopefully something happens that they can detect. And so it's a very inefficient way to transfer information over. And one of the reasons why it's inefficient is because imagine that there are hundreds of thousands of people that are reporting these apples attacking people to varying degree of accuracy and effectiveness. And so then the question becomes, well, which reports that are being reported should I pay attention to, or which are the most likely to affect me? And that's potentially 90% of a threat analyst's time is trying to take those emails, figuring out what part of that data is useful to them, and then manually applying that. And that can take, several weeks in some cases. So it's a terribly inefficient process. And so to do it better, it would be much easier if that data feed, you could tell the system that's feeding you, hey, I am only interested in stuff that affects me. Here's the stuff that would affect me, services and other things, geography, etc. And so just tell me about that stuff. And then that feed then gets piped directly into your SIM device or your next generation firewalls, etc., so that then they automatically flag those things. No human has to read an email. They don't have to mistype it when they put it into your systems. It just goes directly in there. And if that system can move threat intelligence from detection to you very, very quickly, you could shave literal weeks off of the cycle time so that you can find things that much more fast, and also detect that much more quickly, because if they attacked you 3 weeks ago, for example, by the time your person finishes entering the IOC, you may not even be retaining the data that showed that IOC in fact did attack you and did breach your network. So it just increasing the cycle time and being able to automatically do all of the analysis by saying, only tell me about this stuff. It's a transformative way to do threat intelligence.
So I know that you are the founder of the Cyber Warfare Foundation, and that's a big, part of your background. And when you developed your ISAL feed that has now been, pulled into Tech Data, this is a very mature threat feed that the actual U.S. government leverages as well. They actually take the information from that feed. So you have unusual piece of information, and it's through years and years of deploying different types of bots or whatever sensors all over the globe that really feeds in to your system. And it's very powerful. And you were kind of touching on a little bit about how you can throttle that information specifically into the areas that are pertinent to you, but the ability to throttle it out is pretty massive, the amount of data that you're taking in on a global basis. So you actually have insights into things that our government may not even have unless they're pulling that feed in, correct?
Everybody likes to talk about how they have millions of points of presence and things like that. And what it really comes down to is the threat intelligence system that is being sold as a Tech Data ISAL is a system that first started in 1995, and it has been continuously operating for that period of time. A lot of people say we have a global presence. Our ISAL has eyes, if you will, in every country of the world that has a switching phone system. So we literally see it at a level of scale that most governments, including our own, cannot see.
Which is why they're actually getting the feed from you guys. So it's pretty powerful. And because of your involvement with Tech Data, we've been able to get the pricing of that very low. So this isn't a sales pitch on our ISAL product. There's others, like we're saying, there's other threat feeds out on the market that you can leverage. This is just one of those. But the point of this whole talk is to really drive home the importance of having a threat feed integrated with your SIM solution. Otherwise, you really don't have a fighting chance. And to think that you're going to hire a consultant to do the threat hunting for you is probably not going to happen from a cost or from a resources perspective. So you really need to be looking at this to find the bad guys that are likely already in your network. So I really wanted to drive that point home, because for me, it was a light bulb when you're realizing that what do you do in these situations? We don't have the personnel. I don't have the budget to be able to get these guys out. What do I do? Well, you can likely afford a SIM solution or as a SOC as a service, paying it on a monthly basis with the threat feed integrated into it.
Absolutely. And so please do something, right? I mean, there are many different feeds that are out there. And the fact is that everything has its problems, everything creates it, but doing nothing is the worst problem of all. So whether you're using a free and open source feed or you're using a commercial feed, you need to use something. And that will help your team overcome the information overload that they're trying to fight to try to be able to be effective in cybersecurity for your organization. Blue teams are overwhelmed. Just before the new year, there was a survey that went out, and 85% of blue team members are considering leaving the industry. Now, I don't mean leaving the job at your company. They want to get out of cybersecurity because that's how badly overloaded they've been and how terrible their life is every day. The first thing you need to do is give those blue teamers a hug. They definitely deserve it. They've been under a lot of stress and they could use some appreciation, number one. But number two, you got to do things to help them, right? Help them to be more effective, help them to get more wins than losses. And so this is one of the ways to do that. And then, of course, I think in the future, we'll be talking a lot about things called orchestration, where you have problems that are occurred, but you can write a script or some programmatic response that will then try to remediate or isolate that threat so that your team has the time to do other things. And so you couldn't possibly do orchestration if you don't have the ability to detect and identify the problem in the first place. So this is a solid building block that will immediately improve your cybersecurity posture, as well as give you an opportunity to grow into how to do cybersecurity better in the future.
And with that, we'll wrap this up just a little bit early this month. Brett, thanks for your time today, and I look forward to next month's podcast on 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Thanks, everyone.